Good morning, everybody. It's fantastic to have you with us on this Tuesday morning. And thank you for being here with us for this second early years for 2024, conducted as part of the Centre's Early Start Bright Future program. I'd like to begin by acknowledging the traditional owners and custodians of the lands on which we are joining from today. I'm fortunate to be joining you from Wurundjeri Country State, and I'd like to pay my respect to elders past and present and extend that respect to all Aboriginal people joining us today. We acknowledge the importance of connection to culture and community for First Nations children. Sovereignty has never been ceded, and this was and always will be Aboriginal land. So welcome, everybody. It's exciting as the CEO of Victorian Tasmania's peak body for children and families to be opening this forum today alongside our Department of Education colleagues. Together, the Centre and the Department are working hard to improve access to early learning opportunities for every child in this state. And I was saying to colleagues before we started this morning, there is a lot happening in the early years space, and it is an exciting time. The Centre's Early Start Bright Future program has been running for 3 years now, during which time we have seen significant growth and engagement with our project. In the past 12 months alone, we've had 48,000 interactions with the Early Years Finder, which is part of the Centre's Early Years Hub website. This is a space dedicated for child and family services professionals to find easy to digest information about the range of early supports available for our youngest learners to help them thrive. The website is frequently updated with new resources. We develop a response to sector needs and feedback, and we've had more than 1,000 professionals from child and family services and early years education sectors attend our Inclusion in Early Years webinar series, with more sessions to follow later in the year. In today's forum, we will highlight the benefits of a collaborative practice approach between child and family services and early childhood education providers, and how this supports children who are at increased risk of vulnerability to access the supports they need to reach their full potential. The complexity of all of our systems is not lost on all of us, so this collaborative effort is often the way in which we can have what I would consider real workarounds to make sure children do access all of the services that they need. The complexity of some of the lives of children being allocated to child and family services is increasing, with more families presenting with a range of multiple and complex needs. This highlights the importance of cross-sector collaboration to ensure that our systems can work effectively together to provide wraparound support systems for those children who need it most. We know that early childhood education and care services play a vital role in the lives of young children, particularly those who have increased vulnerability. There is clear evidence about the important impact early childhood education plays in supporting school readiness for children, particularly in terms of meeting key social, emotional, physical, cognitive and language skills in the early years before school. But we also know it's much more than this. For children who have experienced trauma or who have experienced abuse or neglect, quality early childhood education can provide a place of safety, routine, and the opportunity to play, build trust and social connections with peers and trusted adults. The Centre has been focused on ensuring learnings from last year's landmark Australian Child Maltreatment Study stays at the forefront of what we all do. We know that there are unacceptably high levels of child maltreatment in our community, and in the early years there's a profound potential to both prevent this and respond to this. One recommendation we strongly support, connections to education built around the child protective factor. The Early Start Bright Future project is strongly focused on this. We aim to create a two-way conversation between child and family services, educators and other allied sectors so that we can share information and learn from each other with the purpose of supporting children to thrive. And I have to say, certainly for us, the last 3 years has been remarkable. Before that, we didn't have these sorts of conversations. And so I have to sort of pinch myself when I'm in these conversations because we weren't having them the way that we are now. And that's a testament to our early years sector and our child and family services sector who are really excited about what's happening in these spaces and know that it works. We hope that you enjoy the fantastic speakers we've lined up today, where we will explore collaborative practice approaches and how child and family services and early years educators can come together, share knowledge and expertise, and collaborate in advocating for and supporting children. In this time of workforce constraints, particularly in the child and family services and in our early childhood sectors, I hear that a lot from our early childhood colleagues, particularly given the size of the reform. We know, though, that a collaborative approach also provides support across our collective workforces. By working together and sharing information, we can provide trauma-informed support and education across a greater period of a child's life and across multiple settings, to ensure that we provide children with the best possible start to life. Our partnership with the Department of Education enables the centre and our sector to support the important early years reform work, enabling the delivery of strategic policy and practice outcomes that can strengthen the system responses. We have a shared goal to make sure every child in Victoria is safe and supported in their earliest development to set them up for healthy and productive lives. We see this happening in the context of greater collaboration between the child and family services and the early years sector. Now, when I use that word collaboration, I know it's used a lot, but in this instance, it really, really matters. And we see the results of that every day on the ground. Together, we can ensure that children have equal access to early education and are supported to engage meaningfully in all of the programs that are on offer. I'd now like to introduce your first presenter of the day, Liz Washington. Liz is the diversity leader at Glen Education. Liz works closely with Rachael Gemmil, who unfortunately can't be with us today. Rachael is the inclusion manager at Glen Education and was also the Early Childhood Teacher of the Year in 2023. The team at Glen Education have a strong commitment to inclusion, changing the status quo and finding innovative solutions, and believe that through education and advocacy, we can create a more just and inclusive society for everyone. So welcome everybody. There's lots of people in the room now. The team will be very happy that you're all here. I can now throw to Liz. Thank you, Liz. Thank you for joining us at such short notice. You're wonderful.
Thanks, Deb. Hi, everybody. So it is so lovely to be here with you and such a pleasure and an honour. Before I begin, I did just want to acknowledge that I know many of you were expecting Rachael Gemmil to speak today, who is the Victorian Early Childhood Teacher of the Year in 2023 and the Education and Inclusion Manager for Glen Education. Unfortunately, Rachael has had a family emergency and couldn't be with us here today. However, she sends her sincere apologies. Our thoughts are with her. As the diversity leader of Glen Education, I work very closely with Rachael. She has been an incredible mentor to myself, and I am hoping that I do this presentation justice for her. Next slide, please.
Sorry, Liz. One second.
Okay.
Hopefully there's a backup.
Beautiful. Thank you. So I know that Deb has also done an acknowledgement. However, I'd like to do one myself. Glen Education respectfully acknowledges Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples as the traditional custodians of the land. We pay our respects to them and their cultures and to the elders past and present. Glen Education believe all children have the right to be and feel safe in environments that respect cultural safety and maintain a culture in which children, their histories and identities are valued, respected and cared for. Protecting children from the risks of abuse is embedded in everyday thinking and practice. Thank you. Next slide. So a little bit about Glen Education, our story. We are a not-for-profit early years manager. We began as GECA in 2011 and rebranded in 2022 as Glen Education. Glen Education vision is to be the leader provider of innovative, professional and inclusive early years education that delivers excellence in learning. Furthermore, we believe in the uniqueness of each individual and the differences each community possesses. Grown from 4 kindergartens in 2011 to 21 kindergartens in 2024. So more services in the past 12 years. We also offer a holiday program for 4 weeks of the year after term 2 and after term 3. We have a dedicated education and inclusion support team that supports all 21 services. We began in just Glen Eira Council. However, we have branched out and now in 5 local government areas: Glen Eira, Monash, Kingston, Bayside and Stonington. And at our 21 services, we have repeatedly exceeded the national standard in the delivery of high quality education and care. Next slide, please. Thank you. So in early childhood, if you look at the first column of blue boxes, these are 3 very important documents in early childhood education. We've got the National Quality Framework, we have the Early Years Learning Framework, and the Best Practice in Early Childhood Intervention Guidelines. These 3 documents emphasize the importance of collaborative partnerships. So today I am going to be speaking about and addressing the importance of collaborative partnerships in achieving, in achieving better outcomes. And these 3 documents, as I said, emphasize the importance of the collaborative partnerships. So the National Quality Standards speak about the effective partnerships support children's access, inclusion, and participation in the program. The Early Years Learning Framework states collaborative leadership and teamwork are built on a sense of shared responsibility for children's learning, development, and well-being. Best Practice in Early Childhood Intervention Guidelines tell us collaborative teamwork practice is where the family and professionals work together as a collaborative and integrated team around the child, communicating and sharing information, knowledge, and skills. These 3 pieces of documentation guide our practice, our documentation, our philosophy, and our policies. So collaborative partnerships are at the core of everything that we do. Next slide, please. So in the early childhood sector, collaborative partnerships are built with families, carers, community support networks, maternal and child health services, allied health professionals, schools, and other early childhood providers. These collaborative partnerships are built on mutual respect and openness to each other's ideas and perspectives, shared decision-making, and shared goals. It comes back to the old saying, it takes a village to raise a child. So imagine the power and the impact when everyone in a child's life is working together towards the same goal. For vulnerable children in particular, this opens the door to possibly gaining further supports, accessing further funding, working together through a process of diagnosis, working together post-diagnosis, working on shared goals, and supporting children through that transition to school. Collectively, we know that this then has an impact of greater consistency, enhanced levels of success, improved access and participation, and an ability to meet learning and developmental needs. Again, what a gift we can give children and their families by just working together. When I was trying to think of an example at one of our services where collaborative partnerships have created a big impact. And there was examples from every service, but there was one that really stood out to me, which is quite recent. And we have a child at one of our services who has been diagnosed ASD level 2. When we met child in term 1, behaviours were very physical and forceful. They include slapping, kicking, pushing, biting, throwing furniture, and the behaviours would occur every 30 seconds to a minute. Behaviours were towards children and educators. So in this environment at the moment, we're having disgruntled families, we're having children who don't want to attend, and we have extremely stressed educators. So in term 1, we knew we had to address this situation and what could we do to support this child's individual needs. And so we started making environmental changes, adding resources for heavy work. We made a whole nother room that was for quiet time or to relax or to retreat to when all children needed a space to go to. We also just ensured that the environment was sensory rich. We implemented visuals. However, the behaviours continued. So we sat down together as a full team, the education and inclusion support team and the educators, trying to reflect on what we could do to support this child further. And it was a light bulb moment. This child had no consistency. The child attended 2 days with us, 2 days at a specialist school, time at home, and then also at multiple therapy sessions in different environments, the psychologist, speech therapist, occupational therapist, and a behaviour therapist. All of these different environments have different rules, different expectations, different goals, and different strategies. So in reflection of that, how confusing for this child and how overwhelming that there's no consistency in their life. So collaborative partnerships is what flipped the script for this child. We decided to formulate a care team, which involved all of the specialists working with this child, all the educators, and the education and inclusion team at Glen Education. We came together and discussed what each of our goals were and what strategies we were using. We realised that all of our goals were very similar. However, it was the strategies that we were implementing that were very different. And we needed them to align for this child. So we then had to compromise a little bit and discuss what are the main areas that we can change in each of our environments to support this child, that there's some consistency in their life. And one of the solutions, which is so simple, is that we implemented the same picture communication system in each setting, creating that consistency that she needed and that she was more comfortable and she could communicate effectively. The result of us working as a collaborative partnership was that by the end of term 2 at kindergarten, this child's physical behaviours reduced from 1 incident per 30 seconds to 1 or 2 incidents per day. A huge impact. By the end of term 3, which we're coming to right now, there are more days without incidents than there are with incidents. A huge impact of what collaborative partnerships can achieve and what a difference we made just working together as a team. Next slide, please. So relationships are at the core of building a collaborative partnership. It is to build a sense of community and a sense of belonging. This is particularly important for vulnerable families. To show how this looks in practice at Glen Education, this slide shows the steps that we would take for a child known to child protection. So relationships are built from the moment that a family enrolls their child with us. The education and inclusion leadership team reach out to the family to discuss any supports they have in place, any supports they would like in place, and the child and family's individual needs. The intent of this is to begin to create a space where children and their families are immediately comfortable and feel safe and supported. And the foundation of a partnership is formed. Once the initial enrolment process has gone ahead, we then also connect to DFFH. This is also to identify what supports are in place and who else we can connect with to support this family. This then leads to connecting with multiple community support networks and allied health professionals. Connecting with professionals already working with the family before they attend our kindergarten service allows us to make modifications to our environment to support the child, allows us to put supports in place to support the child and the family. And we're already creating that sense of community and support and a sense of belonging and a sense of that we care and we want the best for them. During this time, we also connect to our early childhood improvement branch. We ask for advice and recommendations on resources to support the children. And we also ask for them to provide recommendations on professional development for our educators to ensure that they're prepared and ready to support the children. This creates an environment that is already in the process of ensuring that positive outcomes are going to occur and that we're building our capacity to ensure our educators are able to support the family. Now, all these relationships continue throughout the year, throughout the 2-year journey, and regular check-ins and reflection of goals and strategies continually occurs. Now, I go back to that same concept. What an impact this would make for individual children to have a collection of people working together to ensure optimal success in their education, in their learning, and in their life. That instantly would make a child feel safe, secure, and supported, an environment where they will thrive. Next slide, please. The continuity of care is also a huge part of what we want to achieve with a collaborative partnership. If we think back of the example with the child with multiple environments, multiple different professionals working with them, multiple different expectations, success was only achieved when everyone was on the same page and it was consistent for the child. It was familiar and it was less overwhelming. So we want to achieve this with all vulnerable children, particularly with children in out-of-home care. Children in out-of-home care services are among the most vulnerable. Many are not accessing early childhood education and care services. This alone highlights the importance of early childhood services building strong partnerships with the wider community. Carers, caseworkers, maternal and child health nurses, and specialist supports. It works as a two-way street where we can also recommend support services, but then support services can also recommend children to come to our services. This will hopefully achieve greater access and participation for children and also enhances those positive outcomes. Access and participation is only the first step. Continuity of care is ongoing. All support networks need to work together to support engagement, focus on strengths, and ensure children feel safe and secure. To achieve this, we then create a care team that meets regularly, and we would also devise a personalised learning plan for each child, including all of the professional recommendations. We also work very close to NDIS services to ensure the continuity of care. An example of this was quite recently. We had a family who their grandparents are the legal guardians of 5 of the children. The children range from age 2 to age 12. It had been identified that the grandparents were struggling. They were struggling financially, feeding, clothes, outings, bills. They were also struggling physically. driving 5 children to and from school, kindergarten, daycare, to extracurricular activities, and then the washing and just the housework. The family had a significant amount of funding through NDIS. Now, the NDIS contact actually contacted us and mentioned that the family was refusing to use the funding. Now, through our strong partnership that we already had built with this family, we were able to meet each other and we were able to address why they felt like they couldn't use this funding. And they approached us and told us that they felt like if they used that funding, that they would be seen as unfit to care for their grandchildren and that the grandchildren would be taken off them. Now, without that partnership, they wouldn't have shared that information. And then we were able to then work with NDIS and the family collectively to support that family to understand the importance of using that NDIS funding and what supports it could give them, and that it's not there to judge, but it's there to help. So again, we want to enhance engagement and we want children to continue attending and we want to work together to achieve these goals. And this is again another perfect example of how a collaborative partnership has enhanced those positive outcomes for this child. We also want engagement when children attend school. So this process starts really early, especially for children who are vulnerable. Once we understand what school they're going to, we actually invite prep teachers into that care team and into those conversations so that when those children go to attend school, that they are ready and prepared to support that child and that family before the child even attends and those supports are put in place. So when that child does attend, it's that familiar and that comfortable environment for them that what would normally seem a huge leap is now they're comfortable and they're confident in that transition. Next slide, please. So what works? So I've also been asked to address how service providers can best work with kindergartens to support the needs and engagement of children who experienced increased vulnerability. So the most important thing is to be open to building those partnerships with your local kindergarten services and early years management. As I mentioned before, we need to come together. We need a whole picture of this child. And if we're not collectively working towards shared goals and shared understandings, then we're not going to have success. We're working individually and we're not coming together. We need to be open to sharing knowledge. We would also love for service providers to work together to explore strategies and resources that we can implement into the kindergarten environment to assist children who are vulnerable. Another way is that we've actually had a few service providers approach us with family workshops. This works really well so that families are aware of what supports are available to them and what funding is available to them if they are vulnerable and not yet accessing that support. Another way is families quite often ask us for recommendations of supports in the local area, and to build that partnership with service providers, we'd be able to recommend straight away, which would be fantastic. Another way is to lean into the relationships that early childhood teachers and educators have with families. As mentioned, this is a core part of what we do every day, and those relationships are strong from the moment that child attends. And as I mentioned before, in the example with NDIS, the NDIS contact was able to lean in on our relationship with this family so that we could work together to figure out why they weren't using the funding. And because of our strong partnership, we were able to come up with an answer, and then we were able to work on the solution. To work with teachers and educators around their non-contact time wherever possible. Obviously, it's very hard for teachers to communicate in session. We also understand the demands on service providers. Each teacher within a kindergarten in a Glen education kindergarten does have a day of non-contact time where they would be able to collaborate. So it'd be great if everyone could be a little bit flexible in finding time to work together. Also, as mentioned before, if service providers could have a good understanding of funding available to families and the applicable guidelines, and again, who we can refer families to get this information. And then also for service providers to understand what high quality play-based education in the early years looks like in practice. This can be quite controversial. However, in our kindergartens, we don't encourage allied health professional therapy sessions within the kindergarten session. We want children to come in and have that freedom to explore and be with their peers without the added stress of having a therapy session in the environment. We also don't want them to be singled out. And another reason is because if we were to allow all of the children in that kindergarten environment to have their therapists coming in, there's multiple children, I'd say about anywhere between 15 and 20 children in a kindergarten environment that would have therapists coming in and out of the day, which is disruptive to all children. And we want them to have that ability to engage in the environment and feel empowered to make decisions and play to learn. So in that regard, it'd be really good if service providers work alongside us with our philosophy and our policy in regards to this and how we can make it work. And one way we do make this work is that we still have professionals coming in to support our educators to enhance their capability to then implement supports in the environment. Next slide, please. So this slide was Rachael's and I didn't have the heart to delete it. So Rachael recently went to Reggio Emilia in Italy, and the way she talks about how the community's involvement in children's education and the way everyone works together, she speaks about it with such passion. And she was so inspired on her return. And when I came to this slide, the power in each of these statements was just too much and I didn't want to alter it. So I can't speak from experience, but I did want to leave this slide. So the Reggio Emilia approach believes that parents and the wider community have a shared responsibility of children. It is an inclusive responsibility, inclusive approach that highlights relationships as an essential component of learning, relationships between children, family, and the community. So listed here are some of the key values of that Reggio Emilia approach. Humanity and generosity must be the focus for all. Take care of the rights of children, and you take care of the rights of all human beings. Inclusion of all children. So they also, I'm just going to explain this point a little bit. Rachael explained that they do not use the term children with additional needs. They refer to children as children with special rights, which I love. And not teaching but learning. So being involved with children and also empowering them to take control of their own learning and to use resources to build new understandings and see the many possibilities. So Malaguzzi talks about the 100 languages and they say don't steal 99. Quite often we see teachers expecting children to communicate verbally. It's what we expect. However, some children communicate in different ways through art, through dance, through drama. So it's understanding that each child has their own way of communicating and that we don't want to silence that. As teachers and leaders, we must be optimistic. And this one I love, give children the time that they have the right to. So some really powerful meanings there. And it demonstrates the impact we can have on children's learning when we work as a village to make sure it's a positive impact. Next slide, please. So that is it from me. So thank you so much. I just want to leave you with this. You've heard of the butterfly effect, right? That if a butterfly flaps its wings at just the right time, in just the right place, it can cause a hurricane thousands of miles away. It's chaos theory. But see, chaos theory isn't exactly about chaos. It's about how a tiny change in a big system can affect everything. Thank you.
Thanks, Liz. And I know you have to head off shortly, but if anyone has any questions for Liz, please feel free to pop them in the chat. But yeah, thank you so much for your presentation. It was fantastic, and I think, yeah, as you spoke and some of the examples you gave during your presentation certainly highlighted that collaborative approach in working with families and working in that space to support children. So looking, particularly the family you talked about who were living with their grandparents and, multiple complex needs, and being able to build that relationship with the family was really important in being able to support those children in accessing their NDIS plans. And we see that a lot for families who are particularly vulnerable, who have had contact with child protection or have disabilities, that sometimes seeking support is seen almost like a weakness in, if I access that, then that's going to kind of highlight that I'm not coping, or that I can't do this, on my own, or whatever it is, which again, I think I understand where, how families and caregivers feel that way about accessing support, but we know that obviously the supports are there to support them, whether they're biological parents or their kinship carers or foster carers. It doesn't matter the care environment, that being able to access those additional supports to help them to meet the needs of the children is a strength. It's not a weakness. And we know that sometimes those thoughts come from a place of shame and vulnerability themselves. But it's really important work that obviously your teachers are doing to be able to support in that space. So we think that, that was fabulous. A couple of questions for you, Liz. What do you see as the potential collaborative partnerships between child and family services and early childhood education professionals? Do you see a greater partnership?
Sorry, can you just repeat the question? Sorry.
I'm wondering if you see what you see, I guess, as the potential for further collaborative partnerships between child and family service providers, so family service providers and early childhood educators.
I think, well, definitely. I think any support that we can have with each other, and I mean, again, that any support that we can provide families in working collaborative to enhance the children's positive outcomes. I think any services that are willing to collaborate with educators to ensure that happens, we're willing to make the time and to really collaborate, to compromise and find a way that we work together. Also, in terms of early years management, I think that's a huge part of it, and that part of the enrolment process would be also finding that connection to children and family services.
Do you see a space? I'm just thinking about service models. Like we've talked quite a bit this morning about like that, I guess those case-based, which I think are really important collaborative partnerships.
Yeah.
But sometimes there's, I guess, that maybe that capacity to collaborate in a broader sense beyond individual cases. I'm thinking around some of the work we've done, particularly in the disability space, about building that relationship between service providers and EYMs, particularly around with, you know, local support services to build, obviously, like registration engagement for families that are, you know, maybe more vulnerable, they may be culturally and linguistically diverse or have limited literacy. So being able to build those community relationships to support making sure that we are reaching those children that maybe otherwise don't attend, and supporting, you know, those conversations to happen early, like you said, that, you know, we can have conversations prior to children actually attending to support, you know, if there are like modifications or things that the educating staff need to know about a child and to make that transition to kindergarten more successful.
Yeah, I think as well, what I mentioned before, that I think if those partnerships are in place, that it's not just a one-way street where we are supporting individual families, but also getting our name out there, and that we do have a focused education and inclusion support team that are going to support those families. So I guess that's why we want to build not just connections to support services working with our families we have at the moment, but working with support services that are in local communities, so that those families are aware that they have somewhere to go and that there is more engagement, and then we enhance that access and participation. Whereas if we don't have those community connections, then we are just focusing on children that enroll at our services, but we want to broaden that to get people to come in.
Yeah. Do you think there's a need for early years services to, or like providers, I guess, to start those connections, like reaching out to those local services and making themselves known?
Definitely. And that's something that Glen Education is doing at the moment. And it goes two ways. We've got providers reaching out to us, and then we're making that connection as soon as possible. We also, just to get our name out there, and then for forums even like this, to have our name out there and people know the work that we're doing to support vulnerable families.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. And there's a couple of comments there in the chat, which you can probably see. Thanking you, for your presentation. And we know that, Rachael would have loved to have been here, but you have done a fabulous job.
Thank you so much.
in representing her and the team. So, you've made some great points around as well, the benefits of that high quality play-based learning and that protecting that space for young children, which I think is really important, that we can sometimes fall into the trap of thinking, you know, that, like you said, with external services and therapies, that, you know, that might be a space, but it does take that time away from children to play and to learn and to engage with their peers in that environment. So really important messages. So thank you so much for joining us today.
Perfect. Thank you so much.
We really appreciate your time. We know you've got a really busy day ahead.
Thank you.
So I would now like to introduce our next presentation for the day. So I would like to welcome Sigi Hyett, who's the CEO of the Northern Schools Early Years Cluster, and Paul Kenna, who's the principal of Bellevue Park Primary School. So Sigi is a passionate early childhood professional with over 25 years experience, who has worked in diverse settings, including business, in schools, in not-for-profit organisations, local government and the community health sector. Experiencing in early years management, managing the kindergarten cluster and long day care, occasional care and family day care. Sigi also has a background in business management and solutions with a strong financial acumen. She has a passion in developing herself and others with a focus on integrated service delivery and quality improvement to enhance the outcomes for children, families and the community. Sigi has led and supported change management in multiple services and supported integrated service delivery and steered the delivery of numerous children's refurbishments and the rollout of universal access to 4-year-old kindergarten and the 15 hours of 3-year-old kindergarten at services she manages. She is a positive, motivated and innovative with a can-do attitude who loves a challenge, and her qualifications include a Bachelor of Early Childhood, a Diploma in Community Services, a Diploma in Business Governance, and is a member of the Institute of Community Directors in Australia. Sigi will be joined today by Paul Kenna. So Paul is the principal of the Bellevue Park Primary School in Melbourne's northern suburbs, where he's been in that role for 20 years. And during that time, he has transformed the school's philosophy and teaching strategies and facilities to create a vibrant, innovative, community-focused centre of learning and community connection. A key component has been recognising the change that was required to better cater to the needs of students and the provision of support services to families, and that this had to occur before students attended school. With the majority of families from non-English speaking backgrounds with high levels of disadvantage, Paul focused on addressing the key issues of school readiness, family engagement, and the provision of critical support services. He has been a proactive in sharing his vision and has successfully established fantastic partnerships to create on-site community hub in 2012, hosting maternal child health, playgroups, 3 and 4-year-old kindergarten programs, and partnering with the Northern Schools Early Years Cluster. So Bellevue Park Primary was one of the 4 foundational schools which established the Northern Schools Early Years Cluster, and over time these changes have driven significant growth in student engagement and high NAPLAN results, which indicate excellent growth outcomes compared to similar student cohorts, as well as a high connectedness to the school for both children and families. So a key driver has been the amazing partnership the school has had with the Northern Schools Early Years Cluster, and Paul often says that the school and the kindergarten are as one, with aspirations, goals, values and philosophies of both organisations closely aligned. So Paul is a passionate advocate for the early years and co-located kinder and allied health services on school sites, and believes deeply in the significant and critical role of early years partnerships playing in laying out the foundation for future successes for students well before they attend school. So Paul has also been recognised for his innovative leadership on numerous occasions, receiving a High Performing Principals Award, an International Teaching Fellowship in Canada, and a Victorian Principal Association Curriculum Innovation Award, as well as a nationwide Schools Plus Fellowship. He has presented in Australia and overseas, mainly focusing on his work leading the self-organised learning environments, SOL, in Australia. So I will hand over now to Sigi and Paul.
Great. Thanks very much, Michelle. I will, you've got the slides up. Excellent. I can't see Paul, but my name is Sigi Hyett. I'm the CEO of Northern Schools Early Years, and my colleague Paul Kenna is joining me today. Are you there, Paul?
He is. I'm here, Sigi.
Aha, there you are. There you are. So thank you very much for the invitation. It's wonderful to be here today and to share some of the work that we do across Northern Schools, and to highlight one of our lighthouse primary schools, Bellevue Park Primary School. So today, before we start, I would also like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land that we gathered today. For us here, we're on Wurundjeri land, and Wurundjeri people, we pay our respects to them, their cultures, and to their elders, both past, present and emerging, and also to any Aboriginal people that are with us here today. We recognise and respect Aboriginal cultures and their unique place in Victoria's past, present and future, and believe that learning about and valuing Aboriginal cultures enhances all children's sense of place in our community. We also acknowledge that treaty has never been ceded, and will continue the work towards that. Thank you. So just a bit of an overview about our presentation today. We'll do a quick brief of the Northern Schools early years, again concurring all of the things that that Liz said. You know, what is quality in early childhood education and care and education, supporting integrated approaches. We'll be talking about addressing vulnerability and disadvantage, supporting wellbeing, our early years to school transition, and within that scope, there'll also be the case study from Bellevue Park Primary School. Thanks, Michelle. So just a little bit about Northern Schools. Northern Schools early years was developed back in 2011. It was established by a group of principals. That one principal in particular, chair of our board, she had a kindergarten located on her site, and it was the regeneration of the schools, amalgamation of all the schools in the northern suburbs. And this particular principal wanted to take her kindergarten with her. When they established the new school site, the department established the new school site, and the department, in their wisdom back then, the Victorian government said, no, you can't do that. Your education and early childhood and kindergarten is childcare, and that's funded under DHHS. So it's not possible. She's a very innovative person and a bit of a trailblazer in her space. Said to the Victorian government, well, I'm taking them because I believe that early childhood education and care is where it starts. And she really valued that 0 to 6 space and the connectedness that she had with her kindergarten families on her site. And they said, no, well, there's no room. You can't take them. So she said, well, I'll leave the grade 6s. And then anyway, the department said, well, actually, you can't take the kindergarten, but what you can do is develop a kindergarten cluster, and you'll need to have 5 kindergartens. So she rallied with her principals, such as Paul Kenna and some of her other colleagues in the north, and they then, together with the Department of Education and DHHS, developed the Northern Schools Early Years Cluster. And I believe it was, you know, the 11th hour before caretakers mode that the minister signed off on this particular model. So it was one of the first early years clusters linked to schools, with kindergartens on school sites back then. And we're really pleased now that it is a way of the future and the direction of the Victorian government to have kindergartens on school sites or early years services on school sites, because our presentation today will demonstrate and provide just some really clear examples of the benefits for children and families, and also for staff working through this integrated model. So Northern Schools, we are a kindergarten to grade 6, or in some cases birth to grade 6 model, where we also have maternal child health community hubs located on our school sites. We value the participation of our schools. That's a key component, where our principals are also part of our governance model. So each of our school principals sit on a executive board, and they inform some of the practice and some of the community connections that we also that we develop, like referral pathways, linking families and children and community allied health, maternal child health and other services. We also have a wellbeing team within our services that include social workers, allied health and maternal child health nurses. Our family support workers work closely with the school's wellbeing team. Our purpose is to love a life of learning and living, and our values at Northern Schools is trust, relationships, respect, and curiosity. So we, you know, not unlike Liz and the Glen era team, we value the strong connection and relationships between our families, our schools, and our partners, to ensure that we build those trusted relationships with our families and our stakeholders, and continue to be curious about exploring, new and innovative ways to build and strengthen the connections that we have. Thanks, Michelle. We know, as I said, that our model really works. We know from research that quality and quantity matter. Rich relationships that support interactions and meaningful experiences are what makes a difference for all children, and especially for our children who are experiencing vulnerability and disadvantage. We also know from research that structural quality, environment, staffing ratios, frameworks and qualifications also make a huge difference to the outcomes for children. There's also structural quality such as fit for purpose environments that are calming, support natural sustainable practices, environments that support connection such as proximity to schools and other services, staffing ratios where we can have higher to staff ratios and smaller groups for children. And of course, qualifications are essential for our staff to ensure that they're kept up to speed of what's happening in the sector, and also to ensure that that curiosity continues to be sparked. So professional learning for our staff is essential, as well as connecting with the professional learning with our schools as well. Our kindergarten teams, the same as the Glen team, use the Victorian Early Years Learning Development Framework as a guide to their programming and planning. And this framework is for children from birth to 8 years, which means it supports continuity of learning into the foundation years. And we share this particular framework with our foundation colleagues. Some of our teams participate in robust professional development between the schools and kindergarten, such as our peer-to-peer program, which isn't dissimilar to the school's education walks. We also participated in a program called CARE, which is Cultivating Awareness and Resilience in Education and Care. That's run by Banksia Gardens. The primary schools in the north participated in that, and then Banksia Gardens was very forthcoming to offer that to our early childhood educators. So we have that shared language. So there's some common shared language around supporting that transition and continuity of care. We also know that systems quality, it can be, well, sometimes the systems can be a real barrier to supporting families and children. So systems quality is really important. Things like governance, investment and funding. So the governance supports viability of the program, and partnerships, which is essential to our model and the Northern Schools outcomes. As I said earlier, that principal executive group contribute to the planning and coordination between the schools and the kindergartens, both at an executive level, but also at a school site level. And when you hear from Paul, you'll really see that through the case study. You know, Paul's often, as all our principals are, they're part of the kindergarten. They're part, our teams are part of NSEYC, they're part of the community hubs and play groups. So we really work in a multidisciplinary approach to support a whole of family approach and children approach. Investment such as the school readiness funding has enabled our kindergartens and our programs to provide ongoing coaching and mentoring for our staff. We are really fortunate that we get a lot of school readiness funding. Well, fortunate or, yeah, it's great to have the school readiness funding, but because of the high levels of vulnerability and disadvantage, we also get high levels of funding. That enables us, most of our services, to access 31 allied health sessions throughout the year. So these allied health sessions provide our educators and our early childhood teachers access to speech pathologists, psychologists, OTs, that work closely with our teams to build capability and capacity for our educators. So they work directly with the kindergarten staff, not directly with our families and children, and then our family support workers that we directly employ with funding from School Readiness, support the families and children directly. We also employ speech pathologists through Speech Pathology Victoria that run a speech program to support our children's language and communication development as well. This year, part of the feedback from our Principals Network group last year and through our data collection of our school readiness, putting together our school readiness plans, we identified that children were going into foundation with their communication skills having regressed over the last year or so. And we attributed that potentially to COVID. The children that were coming into foundation last year were the children that had experienced that lockdown period over the 2 years. And so they spent a lot of time obviously off-site on devices and so forth. So they missed out potentially on some essential one-on-one or opportunities to engage with their peers and with early childhood teachers in relation to language development. So as part of that feedback, we developed a communication program that our family support workers and our teaching and learning coaches have rolled out this year, and basically gone back to basics with some of our children, taking them through songs, story, rhymes, repetitive puppets, and limited the use of screens such as iPads and things. So really going back to, using clapping sticks as rhyming, using puppets, using the song so that the children can see their actual mouths move. Thank you, Michelle. Next slide. And that all of these programs are as the same as Glen undertaken through a play-based approach. So play-based learning is essential in the early years space. The Victorian Early Years Learning Development states that effective early childhood practice uses integrated and teaching and learning approaches to support sustained and shared interactions with children. And this happens through play and other opportunities where children can make sense of their world and construct ideas about the social and natural world, the people, the places, the objects and the experiences they encounter every day. And a lot of our primary schools also have these play-based early learning environments within their foundation teams as moving into that transition to prep or foundation. We're really proud of our teaching teams and our integrated service delivery teams. They deliver quality services that are measured against the assessment and rating, the tool that's rolled out through NSEYC. And over the past 5 years, all of our services that have undergone assessment and rating through this tool have achieved an exceeding rating. So we're really absolutely thrilled that we're now at 80% of our services that are sitting at exceeding, 2 have not yet been assessed, and 2 are at meeting out of our 17 services. So absolutely proud of that work that our teams are doing, but that has taken a true integrated approach where the staff are working with allied health professionals, maternal child health, schools, playgroups, preschool field officers, and of course our social workers. Thanks, Michelle. As Liz said, it takes a village to raise a child or to support a family, and it is a systems approach. At Northern Schools, we operate in some of the most disadvantaged and culturally diverse communities in Victoria. I think one of our services has like 90% of English as a second language students enrolled. We know that our kindergarten to grade 6 model or 0 to grade 6 model benefits all children and families to reach their full potential. But it does take quality and for all children to thrive, not just for disadvantaged communities. And the key is the effective partnerships to address the barriers for families and support the enrolment process, the participation and regular attendance, because we know that your programs can be of utmost quality, but if children are not attending, the children will not thrive and the learning trajectory won't actually increase. So an example of that is we had one of our young graduate teachers was completing her VIT registration and moving up to full registration. She did a research project on 3 children, 2 of them where she had sort of measured their development, were sitting, you know, sort of an average sort of development scale, and one of the children was actually quite high in his development. Throughout the year, throughout her project, she focused on communication and well-being, and the 2 children that were sort of sitting at average had attended all of the kindergarten sessions or most of the kindergarten sessions. It's a great quality program, lots of linkages with allied health professionals, our primary schools, our social workers. And the child that didn't attend, the child that was exceeding at the beginning of the year, had limited attendance, and his actual learning and development regressed. So it's our family support workers are essential to some of the work we do to support that participation and to ensure that children are attending. So sometimes it just takes a text message for our families to say, no, we're really missing Paul today. Happy for him to come at any time. So, you know, so that trust is built, the relationship is built, and also providing some context around kindergarten and early years is a place of learning, and it's not just it's also a place of fun, but it's not just childcare. It's essential to children's learning and development and outcomes for future. So once families are coming to kindergarten, we need to ensure that we support them to participate and attend. Then they will benefit from the quality. Our connection also to playgroups and hubs is essential to the participation of our families and children and to other agencies. So particularly those that are facing adversities, because our family support workers and our schools and our allied health team can link them through to other referral pathways. Thanks, Michelle. I'm just going to run through this slide. So I'll now hand over to Paul Kenna, who will provide a case study on our systems approach.
Thanks, Sigi, and I miss you too.
I miss you so much.
Absolute pleasure to be invited to co-present with Sigi, and it's a pleasure to be part of the Northern Schools Early Years Cluster. It's such a dynamic, progressive organisation who are now getting the recognition in a number of ways. So, yeah, thank you for having me along today to represent our principals that are part of our Northern Schools Cluster. Our school's about 11 k's from the city. It's like a little country school close to town, so it is a great school to lead. A little bit of a background there. You can see we've got about 73% of our children from non-English speaking backgrounds, and our ICSE value is quite low compared to the Australian average, 932 to 1,000. And our distribution of socio-economic advantage, you can see that 63% is the bottom quartile and 25% the bottom middle quartile. So we're dealing with families that really need a lot of support, and over time we've our own data and other data sets have shown us that didn't matter what we were doing at our school, it wasn't enough, and we needed to address those issues. Thank you, Michelle. So I've put together a a little slide here that talks about it's the Australian Early Development Census data that you guys will be pretty familiar with. On the top of the slide is the state averages, and the bottom slide in each column is our school. So the first one you see there is social competence. Across Victoria, in each of those 3-year measurements, was about 9% of kids that experienced difficulty with that area. And you can see below that we had the red line shows about 90% of our kids developmentally vulnerable, and you can see that graph's continued to rise, and the orange one developmentally at risk. So that's an indication of the type of children that were coming into the school from 2009 to 2021, it continues now into 2024, that they weren't ready for school. What we found, a lot of these little kids were 18 months to 2 years behind. Emotional maturity, the next column, you can see that the average across the state in 2021, that red box, was 7.7% of kids that had difficulty with this area, and we had 50% developmentally vulnerable and children at risk as well. And again, language and cognitive skills were issues for our school. Could you go to the next slide, Michelle? The final slide here, communication skills and general knowledge. You can see that our children coming in didn't have those communication skills and general knowledge. And there was a lot of kids, mainly 90% of our prep intake in the last 10 to 12 years have had these issues of vulnerability in those 5 domains of their development. Thank you, Michelle. So the challenges for a school back then, we had high intake of refugees, high EAL, low capacity in the community, and not a lot of aspirational parents at that stage. That all resulted in the wonderful thing called NAPLAN, which identified our school as a failing school with and the assumption that our teachers were not up to scratch and our strategies and programs weren't up to scratch, and the leadership wasn't up to scratch. So we found ourselves we were defending our efforts despite the fact that we knew what we were doing and the measures we were taking. So at a system-wide level, there was unfair judgments about our school and schools similar to us. In fact, the schools that are all part of the Northern Schools Cluster. And I spoke to our school council many years ago about what's not my remit to do something about kids before they get to school, but it was the only option that we had. And I knew that work that we could put into place there would ultimately prepare kids and school readiness, would help us with our data and the kids' learning. Thank you, Michelle. So that's where the concept of the hub was supported by school council. We got some grants, we saved, and we built a hub. And the key part of it was having maternal child health services, but across the corridor, our great partnership with Northern Schools Cluster. It gave the school an opportunity to track kids from birth to their year into school, and we could do some vertical tracking, and we knew the children really well and we knew the families really well because of the great communication that we have, especially with the kindergarten staff. So our Nat and I, our assistant principal, be across there probably 2 or 3 times a week, just checking in with the Northern Schools staff. And towards the end of, or the start of semester 2, we start our program where we're really starting to work with the kinder staff to identify kids that need extra support and to put in place strategies for that smooth transition. The nice thing about having a kinder on staff, one of the many benefits, is that the kids in kinder see their old teachers. They're hanging through the fence all the time with our preps and preps grade 1, grade 2. They see their kinder teachers, and it's quite lovely. and they can see their cousins and siblings as well. So there's a real beautiful connection between the school and the kindergarten, and that supports their social and emotional growth. Having a hub with the northern schools means that parents really only enrol once. They enrol with northern schools, and a lot of those parents coming through into our school, we know them. They might have to enrol in the school, but the connections are already established. Thank you, Michelle. So yeah, desperation sometimes leads to inspiration. So our school-based strategies are very much supporting the values and the direction of our kindergarten, with a focus on curiosity and play-based learning, especially in the junior classes, but that continues right through into our senior classes. The benefits of having an on-site early years program is that there's coherence across from the early years into the school, and there's a real alignment between the values and the curriculum, which is really important. When we had our own kinder on site before the early Northern Schools Early Years Cluster was formed, it was really difficult as a principal to try and manage it because it was so complex, and quality assurance and all the programs that you had to have in place was really difficult. So when we formed the Northern Schools Early Years Cluster, it was managed, and it was managed so well. And I've got to say this in this forum, that Sigi has been an absolute jet in coordinating the growth and reaching out and establishing partnerships through many organisations. And she's been the nexus between the principals and the board. So it is really, really a living partnership in the early years. And it's so beautiful for me as a principal of 20 years to see the growth and the benefits that have come into our school, and kids coming to school now a lot more ready for learning in a primary school, and their language skills and social skills are starting to develop a lot earlier now. If you flip to the next one, Michelle. So I've just wrapped it up with some of the positive outcomes of having on-site kindergartens and a fantastic relationship. We've got incredibly strong partnerships and a shared vision. The kindergarten access our facilities every week, and they can use it for anything they like. And we try and align our school and kinder programs. If we're doing a special day, a footy day or whatever, we invite the kindergarten to be part of it so the kids can join in, and our kids love playing with the little kinder kids as well. It's a large growth and uptake of the model across the systems, and the awards that the Northern Schools picked up last year with the early years excellence awards it was so fantastic and beautiful to be part of that celebration of all the work that's gone into that over the years. Our early identification and targeted on-site support through the kindergarten and our maternal child health, as I said, really benefits the kids and the families and builds to stronger transitions, Ready, Set, Pret and school readiness programs that we coordinate through the kindergarten. This year we're building the final part of our hub that's looking good too, Sigi.
Oh, great. Can't wait to see it.
And it's we called it Kids Zone Inclusion and Wellbeing Centre. It's got a nice big kitchen, a couple of beautiful big breakout spaces and some offices. And that will be our part of our philosophy is it will be used for community outreach, and more particularly through our Marybeck maternal child health people. They'll do breastfeeding classes, parenting classes, first mothers group, and also through the kindergarten, who will be able to access that area for whatever programs they would like to do. So if I think about the school now, it's a birth to year 6 model, but the strength is in the relationships and the goodwill between our partners, especially the Northern Years Early Years Cluster. We're seeing more engaged, supported and happier families, which leads to better learning outcomes. And it's under the heading of, greater social justice and equity for families that need it the most. And as I've said, you've got to love that. Thank you.
Fantastic. Thanks, Paul. That's, an amazing case study of Bellevue Park Primary School and like I said, one of our lighthouses at Northern schools. And we have many, but Paul's also a great presenter and also loves to tell a great story and really, was enjoying listening to your stories, Paul. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
We know that to support families and to support families access and attendance to kinder, and I can see there's a question in the chat around, some of our innovative practices around attendance and how do we support and engage that. Well, focus is on wellbeing and it's at all levels of our organisation, and this aligns to the framework of improving outcomes for students, with the schools as well. Mental health in primary schools funding, which has become a connection to our school readiness funding, where we can actually join those funds to establish our wellbeing teams and wraparound support for children and families. So at Northern Schools, we have a wellbeing team that currently consists of 7 social workers. We'll call them family support workers because often if you say to families we've got a social worker on site, they can get a little bit alarmed. So calling them a family support worker, and where they're building trust with the families and they're building that relationship. When they've built that trust and that relationship, they start to share their stories, particularly refugee families or some families that are experiencing high levels of vulnerability. They won't share until they trust. So once they're trusting and sharing, they will open up and then they will start to link in with our family support workers. Often our early childhood teachers do not have time to send a text message to families and say, you haven't been at kinder today, because they've got a large group of children or a large number of things that they've got to do throughout their teaching time. So having the family support worker there has been a key component of increasing attendance at our kindergartens and also participation. It's also been a real key component to support referrals and pathways. So, and field officers, allied health teams, and of course our families and children to provide referrals and pathways and identify children most at risk that required kindergarten inclusion support. Now, often we are not able to access that until term 2 or term 3 the following year, because by the time children come into the kinder, are identified and then applications are put in place, you're halfway through the year and children are already behind the 8 ball, and then they're going into foundation 2 years or 18 months behind. So what we did last year, our family support workers worked with about 28 families and children and staff across our services. They worked with NDIS, allied health services such as DPV, Mary Health, preschool field officers, completed referral pathways and kindergarten inclusion support applications for some of our most vulnerable children. And at the beginning of term 1 this year, we had 24 children start 4-year-old kindergarten with a kindergarten inclusion support worker, that's an additional staff member to support access, participation and inclusion in the kindergarten program. So that's been a real highlight for us. That's in the time that I have worked in kindergartens and early services, it is usually term 2 or 3. So to be able to have that support from day one, term 1, and inclusion support plans in place and linkages with our important stakeholders has just been an absolute deal breaker for these children. I can't wait to see the outcome when they're going into foundation and their trajectory of learning in a couple of years. The same goes for children coming into foundation or into the primary schools. As Paul said, we're able to, our wellbeing teams are able to link in with the primary schools really early on and identify children and families that are experiencing vulnerability and complexities or require additional support, and to put those referrals in very, very early so that when they're starting school, those children also have referral pathways in place, applications in place, and funding can be accessed, because funding is a huge barrier. If we haven't got the referrals in place, we don't get the funding and we don't get the support, and the children are then disadvantaged. So some other things that we're currently doing, we're working with CoHealth to develop some other early access pathways, and potentially some paediatricians that can come and work with our services to sign off on applications and sign off on children where they do need that additional support. However, the wait lists are so long. So, sometimes we've got all the supports in place, we've done everything, and then they go and our family support workers or social workers go with families to the medical appointments even, but they to actually see a paediatrician and get something signed off can be months and years. So we're doing some innovative work around that space at the moment, and hopefully we will have a really positive outcome there. All of our services and all of our teams also have things in place through their professional development, such as the zones of regulation at every single one of their kindergartens. So when families are coming into our services, they're seeing these learning spaces, and they're actually sharing that with the families as well. And those zones of regulations are then, progressed onto school. So children, that continuity of learning and that shared teaching language, although we know the frameworks are different, there is some alignment that we can work with and support that continuity for children, particularly in that vulnerable space. Our environments are also have been a huge, I suppose it's seen a huge change in our environments, and that's thankful to the Victorian government and the building blocks funding. We were able to upgrade all of our services to increase capacity so that we can have our 3-year-old programs start and really look and identify some of the children that are not accessing kinder. So that's through our playgroups, through our community hubs, where our teams are going in and they're talking to families and saying, this is what's available. We've got lots of English as a second language, so we employ a lot of staff that have English as a second language as well, that can connect with our community. So really looking at place-based and our people that know the community as well, so that they can form those connections and build that trust, and then talk to the families about what is available, because often families don't know. We have some of our teams are working with Foundation House and working in community of practice around supporting refugee families, and that is, early identification, going into those communities, finding those families that have young children, and we can start that early intervention and that support around access and participation, and then keeping them on, in attendance as well. it doesn't happen in isolation. It only happens through strong partnerships and networks, and that has to be continued at all levels, at a leadership level, at a service level, at a middle management level, at a department level. We're continually advocating for this kind of work because it does take a lot of energy, but also a lot of funding. So, our 3-year-old groups, the current ratio for kindergarten is 1 to 11 for over 3s. Now, Paul says the children coming into foundation are 18 months to 2 years developmentally behind. Sometimes when they're coming into our 3-year-old programs, we have the majority of our children in nappies. A lot of children, can't feed themselves. English is a second language. Again, they've traumatised from escaping war-torn countries and so forth. So they're coming to us, really in a space where they're requiring a 1 to 4 ratio, not a 1 to 11. So we're advocating, and every opportunity I get, and if there's anyone in this forum that can assist us in advocating with smaller ratios and more funding for more staff in these spaces, because we need the teams to be able to be there, to be with the children, but also then to connect with our stakeholders, because all of that takes time, energy, and and a lot of trust. A lot of trust is really, really important. Next slide. Thanks, Michelle. Transition to school. We've been talking about that the whole time. It's not a point in time, it is a process. So the relationship and the collaboration between our early childhood services and schools, our maternal child health, our playgroups, our hubs is essential to foster that whole of child and whole of community approach. So really looking at a whole of school community, school as community hubs, and a sense of belonging, because children have to go to school. It's the law. So parents know they need to send their children to school. Children don't have to have maternal child health checks. That's something that is an opt-in. Children don't have to go to kinder. That's something that is an opt-in. But if we can use a school space, and even if you're not co-located on a school site, you can create that, as Glen and Ira are doing, create those relationships and create that support with the school for that whole of school community approach, where we can start that early intervention. We can get in, talk to them, talk to the families. If there's, a community hub on site, go to the community hub, go to the play groups, access that those spaces and those families, and access our allied health professionals at all levels, and to provide that ongoing support. And really, our schools at Northern Schools, we're very fortunate. Schools are ready for children. Children aren't ready for school. So we, the schools, know the children so well, so they're ready for them, as Paul said. They've known them, and now they're knowing them since they're 3, but they also know them from the play groups where we've got community hubs, and when they're coming into NSEYC with their little babies. So at Paul's school, as an example, we've got Katie across the hallway from our kindergarten. So she sees a family coming in with a young baby, and they might have a 3 or 4-year-old, so she'll connect them straight to the kinder. Or our kinder teachers, know, connect with the maternal child health nurses to do the 3.5-year-old checks, because we know a lot of our families aren't accessing those supports, and that's where we can start that early intervention process as well. That doesn't happen always at a service level, and that's what's really, really important for that to happen at a leadership level as well, and form those partnerships at all levels, because if one of those components are not there, things tend to fall off the rails. Next slide, please. This is just an illustrative map of our Victorian Early Learning Development Framework and the Victorian curriculum, and just showing the linkages between the two. So there is a shared language there. The Victorian Early Learning Development is currently in revision at the moment. They're making some great changes to that, and I know the Victorian curriculum is also in revision as well. So they're actually working at the Victorian Curriculum Assessment Authority are now working with both documents and looking at both of them, because it's, you know, that kindergarten to grade 6 or kindergarten on school sites is front and foremost. But as important is the community hubs, the play groups, the maternal child health, because we need to get in early. 3-year-old really isn't. You know, if we don't have a connection with our play groups or MCH, we can miss a lot of children around that access. So next slide. So some of the work, you know, some of the things that people can do that we are doing is buddy programs where we have our preps and grade 4s, we have shared learning, we have a reading program where the 4s come in. So they're learning about leadership. Sometimes our little kindergarten children come in and they're leading the program, particularly around Aboriginal Torres Strait Islander curriculum, because kindergartens, you know, been doing that for quite a bit, and we're still learning in that space, but some of our kindergarten teams have already embedded Aboriginal Torres Strait Islander culture really well in their programs, and they're sort of setting an example for others in that space. As Paul said, our children visit regularly to the school, the playground, the gym. We also have structured kindergarten foundation teacher meetings. So information shared between the cohorts so that the children, the teachers are well aware of putting early supports in place, and also well aware of children that need that extra support to extend their learning as well. We have shared coaching and mentoring between our primary schools and our early years services. We also have shared between our wellbeing teams, such as I said earlier, our social workers connecting with the school social workers and wellbeing teams. Our children participate in school events, fetes, parades, often maternal child health and playgroup will attend with that as well. We have shared book week activities, kindergarten attendance at school assemblies, library visits, shared PE, language, music classes, some of the systems barriers that we can strip down through our relationships. One of our schools, they have Auslan, so the children are learning Auslan in kindergarten, and the principal creates the timetable around that. There's a real collaboration between our wellbeing teams to support the children with additional vulnerabilities and additional rights. So, and also our families. So they have attended court with families, they've attended doctor's appointments with families. If they need in-home support, we can look at how that is also supported, and really getting to know the family story and building that trust has been essential. Next slide. So how can you support integrated service delivery and a whole of school or whole of wraparound approach to support families, not just kindergarten, but from birth to grade 6. So be informed. What does, effective leadership look like in your settings, setting that tone and really valuing early childhood education and those transitions, and really being an advocate for some of the other primary schools. Principals are really, really busy. They often don't have time to jump into other spaces as, lots of other professionals. So really getting in and advocating around the partnerships and the value of the connections and the trust that needs to be built in order to have that true integrated service delivery model encourage conversations, get to know your community, local schools, share information about what you do, share it with your families, you know, go to the play groups, have discussions, go to spaces where we know community are, such as, if there's a group meeting at the local library, we send some of our teams in there and see how we can connect in with them and support education, sharing what's available, what resources are available in early years, schools, hubs, playgroups and maternal child health services, and really encourage connections in program and collaboration and curriculum. Thank you.
Thanks, Sigi and Paul. It's always great to hear about. I know we are close to time, but I wanted to just, there's a couple of questions that have come through the Q&A as well while you've been talking. Kelly had asked, she's curious about learning more about the enrolling the whole family approach and what that looks like in practice.
Yeah, so we do that from the onset, like we've changed things like our enrolment form. So when our families enroll, there's a tick box in there that says, are you happy to share information with the local primary school? So that's the first thing. We talk about that we are co-located at the primary school. We have two services that aren't co-located, but we link in with the closest primary school on site. So Bush Kinder, where our head office is close to Glen Central Primary School, and that's the school partner there. So we also, when we do a tour of the kindergarten, we also give them a tour of the school. In all of our brochures, it is our enrolment form will say the school logo as well as the northern schools. It will talk about the school, we'll talk about the connection, talk about the connection between NSEYC, our wellbeing teams. When schools do the school tour, and Paul, you can jump in here, they also go through the kinder, the community hubs, the playgroups and the NSEYC. So it happens at the very beginning. And we ask families to share, are they happy to share information between children that are at school or children that are at kinder? And most families say yes, that they're happy to share their information. When there's a community fete, a school fete, the kindergarten's involved and vice versa. An example of that is at the beginning of this year, we opened our new kindergarten at Roxburgh Park Primary School. And the first thing we did was the school sent out a welcome breakfast or welcome barbecue breakfast. It was a breakfast with sausages, and the families were invited to that, the school families and the kindergarten families. So that whole of school approach this is one space. You are coming to, Roxburgh Park Primary School and kindergarten and early years services. You are coming to Bellevue Park Primary School, where we have a kindergarten, an NSEYC, a playgroup, a community hub as well. So, when the families are in the community hub, we can already, the school principal links in with them and they'll see that they've got young children or if they need any other supports, and they'll provide. And they're soft referrals. So families don't feel intimidated, and they're building trust over time. And I can't emphasise the word trust for our families, because the higher, as you all know, the high vulnerability, the less trust is there because of the adversities that many families have faced. So to build that trust and to build that over time is really essential. And, so when they're coming to kinder and they see Paul Kenna as a school principal popping into the kinder regularly and saying, "G'day," and knowing all the children's names, they're comfortable. They're comfortable, and they're comfortable when we have those conversations around soft referrals and so forth. Yeah.
Yeah, it really strikes me as a model where, yeah, there's something for everyone, whether that's, yeah, community hubs. There's an opportunity for every member of the family to be engaged and involved in, you know, in not only the education of their children, but in other programs and supports, which I think when, particularly as you said, you're talking about high volumes of families with cultural diversity and English as a second language, being able to create that sense of community for families is really, really important, and I think a real strength of the model. But also, I think the other thing that stands out for me is that, you know, it's being involved. It's not sitting behind a desk and, yes, like for Paul, sitting at his desk at the school, but going in and visiting the kinder.
Sleeping under it, thanks, Michelle.
Yeah. I
My
think
preferred
too.
position. I've got one thing to add, Sigi. Sorry.
Yeah.
Just a living example of, you know, having a safe and inclusive school for our diverse community is that one of our things that we've done that we're really proud of is that we found out that in terms of the girls, one girl across the whole school played organised sport, and the teacher and I decided that we'd see if we could kind of pursue a netball idea. The teacher used to coach netball. Anyway, it's blossomed and bloomed. And now we've got Bellevue Park Panthers Incorporated. We've got 4 teams and we've won 2 premierships. And it's mainly kids who are from families where the mothers never had an opportunity to play sport. So now we're getting dads and mums coming to support the team of the Darebin Netball Association. We won our first 2 premierships this year, which was absolute joy to see. But our big kids coach the little kids in Prep 1 too. And the kids know about it in kindergarten. They go and watch the Panthers train. And the other offshoot that you talk about, Sigi talks about, you know, community from birth to year 6. Well, one of the fantastic things about this innovation is that we now have a Mama Panthers netball team, predominantly made up of Muslim mums who never were allowed to play sport. So in terms of breaking down barriers and building relationships with the school and the kindergarten, that's a living example of a fresh way to look at it. Kids' involvement gets parents in.
Absolutely. We also have things like language programs within the school. So we employ, again, we apply for funding to run the language programs. So we have Arabic teachers at our services that link in with the primary schools as well, but it builds that connection with the family. So the children are learning Arabic, they're learning English alongside. So when they're coming to kinder and they can only speak Arabic, or another, you know, one of them it's Urdu. They're also learning English on the side, which is, so they're doing both. And that's building their capacity as well. And then being able to communicate with families, you get that buy-in, you build that trust. They know this person understands me. So really looking within our own community to employ people and support and upskill them. You know, one of the young mums came to Bellevue Park Kindergarten quite some years ago. It was her first entry into Australia. She had a young child, started kinder, and she didn't really want to leave her child, and she didn't have a sense of belonging anywhere else, but she felt very comfortable in the kindergarten space and in that school space. So the kindergarten teacher invited her to stay. She stayed and was part of the program, decided that she really liked what she saw, went and did her Certificate 3, then went on to do her diploma. She's now teaching at our Glen Children's Centre as a kindergarten teacher. So, you know, building capacity within our own community is absolutely essential for community outcomes. So, yeah, netball teams, you know, education, all of those connections are so vital to build wonderful communities and communities that have a sense of belonging and are proud. You know, I want to come watch the netball game, Paul.
Anytime. We'll put you in the Mama Panthers team if you like, Sigi.
Thanks.
Michelle, you can come too.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
It's there's amazing connections between as well, that not only the community for those, the Mama Panthers, but also, the connection between physical health and mental health as well in supporting that across all of our communities. And like you said, Paul, for families that haven't had those opportunities previously, to be able to provide that through this partnership is, probably not something you set out to achieve in the beginning, but it is I think a really important demonstration, I guess, of the importance of that partnership in building the community in the northern suburbs.
Yeah.
I am mindful of the time, so I will move us on. We're actually going to have a quick break if people need a bathroom stop or a fresh cup of tea. So we will pause for a moment till 11:25 if people can come back then to, we'll continue on. But thank you, Sigi, and thank you, Paul. It was fantastic to hear from you.
Thanks,
Thank you, Michelle, and everybody else, for taking the time to share some of our stories. And we're just really super proud of the work that we do. It's for our children, our community, and it's working alongside our families and children and community, and appreciate your time to listen today. So thank you very much.
Keep up the great work, guys. Early years is critical. Well done for all the work you do. Thank you for inviting.
You too. Thanks, Paul.
Thanks,
Bye.
Paul.
Thanks, Sig.
Hi everyone, welcome back. Hopefully you've made it back from our quick break in between presentations. So I would now like to introduce our third presentation for this morning. I would like to introduce Fauzia from the Melton Montessori Early Learning Centre. Fauzia has 22 years experience in the industry, beginning her career in youth work, counselling and as a support worker before entering the early years sector, where she has discovered a gap between early education and the children, and this realisation started her passion for early childhood education. Her primary goal is to set up children for success regardless of their socioeconomic background, and she holds a firm belief that all children deserve the best start in life and in education, and she's particularly passionate about supporting children from diverse backgrounds, including those from refugee and culturally and linguistically diverse backgrounds. Her commitment is to create an inclusive and nurturing environment where every child can thrive. And for the past 5 years, Fauzia has led the team at the Melton Montessori Early Learning Centre, a non-profit centre in Melton that runs the Montessori program. So when she started, the centre was at a working towards level in the National Quality Framework, but through teamwork, dedication and her leadership, it has been elevated to an excellent rating earlier this year. The Melton Montessori team put a lot of effort into the quality of their programs to ensure that they are engaging, inclusive and effective. Fauzia appreciates the contributions of her team members and prioritises their mental health and well-being. She values and encourages all ideas they have for their programs and that fosters a collaborative and supporting environment across the team, and the Centre is committed to community outreach efforts in working closely with local families and organisations to support and uplift the community. So I will hand over to Fauzia now. Thank you.
There I go. Thanks, Michelle. Hello, everyone. Michelle's already told you a little bit about myself. So I took over Melton Montessori 5 years ago. As Michelle said, I started in the youth. I worked as a youth worker for, before I started the early childhood, it was about 22 years. And then in my 5th year of youth work, I realized that there was a gap between the early years and youth and all the young people that I was working with. It all came back to early childhood and what's happened to them through early childhood. So I went and studied a little bit and wanted to know a little bit about the early years. So I did my cert through while I was on maternity leave. Then I went to do a placement, and back in the days it used to be called ABC. And when I went in there, it was very interesting on what I observed with children. They were putting little kids into finding it very challenging to work with kids. And at that time for me, it was like I enjoyed it, and I was attracted to young, vulnerable children. And that's where my career started. And they asked if I could work with them at that point, because I thought, oh, I work with youth and it's more challenging. How can they not work with these little children? They need our support and what's happening. And this is where then I kind of saw that there was a gap in there. I went and did further studies while I was still doing youth work. I joined play groups to kind of understand a little bit of children. I did storytelling at the libraries. I just wanted to see different groups and different children in different areas. And that led me to 2015, working in an organization as well that was a non-for-profit. And I really enjoyed working in there. And in 2019, this opportunity came up at Melton Montessori. So I was a part of it. And I was building, so my dream is always to be in a non-for-profit organization, and I built that as well. And when I came to Melton Montessori at that time, it was at about 20% capacity, working towards, and there was a lot of compliances and a lot of things. So it was a hard work getting in there. And first, what I did was the philosophy. I worked and built a lot of my connection and my intensive experience working with families and staff. So that was the first thing I did, and we created as a team. I'm big on collaboration. So we created a philosophy, and that philosophy was about inclusion and inclusion to everybody. And at the center that I'm currently at Melton, 40% of the families are from non-English speaking background, 25% are family violence affected, and 8% of our families are from Indigenous. So I had a lot of work to do, very intense work to do. And I started working with the families, I started working with the staff, and I intensively started working with the children and underpinning what we're doing and where we are going to head together as a team. So it wasn't only my project, but I included everybody, and I got the community around us as well. So I connected to the maternal child health nurses, I connected to the AMEP program, which is an English program, knowing that a lot of our families were from non-English speaking background. I connected to all the schools. So a bit of my community services came in place, and that's when I started building that connection. And from there, then we created, and this is with staff as well, we had a staff member that works in a church, and we had connection with Aldi. So we created that as well, because a lot of our families couldn't afford, and we tried to keep the fees as low as possible. So we connected with Aldi, and we did like a pantry for our families. Then we went to do clothing for our families as well. And one of the staff started that project, and I'm big on allowing staff to come up with projects and supporting them through those projects. So another staff member created like a pantry, built a pantry, and we put it, Laura here, we put it together. And we started building the pantry, and it was amazing how the families were using the pantry. Then we went to clothing pantry. And another staff member as well from the Pacifica families wanted to do things with her community in terms of early years, and I was there to support that program and allowed her to be part of that program as well. So another thing that we're big on is our staff well-being. So we've got a mental health day, we run team buildings. So we've got a budget every year that we put aside for the staff well-being. So we do things like canoeing, karaoke's, and going out to do team building with the staff. We used to run a well-being Wednesday as well on every Wednesdays, and the staff came up with that idea, and I supported the staff through that. Some staff were also doing activities like swimming and getting all the staff together, and some staff were teaching other staffs who couldn't swim, and we had to change the rosters to allow that. Another staff member was helping another staff member to drive, which was really good, and that was Laura as well. And we could give time during the day so Laura can take the other staff member, and she ended up getting happy. So we created within ourselves a little family that we're there to support each other, which was very important, and we treated each other like families. And we're very lucky because what we've done as well, part of our budget, because we're not for profit, we ended up having extra staff, and that could help ourselves build what we want to do. So I'm a big supporter of ensuring that all staff reach their potential. This is not where they can stop, but if they want to continue further, they can do. So we've got about 7 staff this year that have finished their degree, and they started from certificate 3, that we give them that extra support to reaching their bachelor's as well. And another staff member who came up with an idea about a festival that happens in Melton, and we supported the staff to do it and getting families involved. And it's a little baby project that she works with. So it's a matter of allowing our staff member to grow and ensuring that they that they're supported as well. So, and like it's a team collaboration that we do it together. Another big project that we've worked on is the Bush Kinder program. And that came with knowing that a lot of our families and our children are not getting a lot of nature play. It's either the families are drug affected or family violence, or parents are working long hours and they're not getting that. So we did a lot of research in terms of what we're going to do, a lot of consultation with the families, with their staff and with our children. And it was a project that we were working over for nearly 2 years. And we had a bit of budget to train staff on how we could do Bush Kinder, including myself. And looking at our families, if they could afford, and what our families, which families could miss out of the Bush Kinder. So we had to work on putting a little bit of budget to buy families, to buy our children some clothing and equipment so they don't miss out. And that took long to put that into our budget, and get them all the clothing gears so they don't miss out. And we've got a little video to show you about our Bush Kinder that the children and our staff, Tiana, that did the Bush Kinder. We'll play that. And then, thank you. So as you could see, once we started that program, and it took again 2 years of intense work with the families, staff, and our children to put the Bush Kinder program. We saw the benefits of what the program was. This year, at the start of the year, it was this year, February, we invited a lot of services to come, and we took them to our Bush Kinder area so we could showcase our Bush Kinder and see if there's any services out there that are wanting to start Bush Kinder, because we saw the benefits that the children and the staff and the families benefited from. So we started a mentoring program with local services, but we ended up getting about 33 services that came to our center, and we walked into the Bush Kinder site, and we said that we were open to help them go through all the policies that we've created, all the risk assessments, how we created it, how we had parent meetings and discussions, because at start it was very hard with the families that we're working with. They didn't want Bush Kinder to start, and we had to advocate for Bush Kinder. So it was a lot of training and working with families to ensure that they understand the benefits of what children could benefit from. The families, they would say it's cold and the children are getting sick because we're taking them in winter. And then some will say at this time that there were snakes and we had to stop the Bush Kinder program. So it took us a lot of effort and advocacy as well to work with our families, including staff at the start, which were not up for the Bush Kinder program. And now it's something that they enjoy and families are seeing the benefit. And we thought that would extend that to other services and work with other services in terms of how we can support them start a Bush Kinder and how they can advocate for children to start Bush Kinder as well. Our philosophy as well, when I started working at the center, it was just a piece of paper. So we had to sit with our families, with our children, with our staff, and we came up with an inclusion song with children to unpack about our inclusion policy. We're happy to share that as well. If you want to share, we can share that. Cool. Thank you. Another gap that we also saw was the Indigenous. A lot of our staff did not understand about Indigenous. We had families, we didn't know how to kind of connect and learn about the Indigenous culture. So we ended up having to recruit an Aboriginal liaison officer who helped our service to training, so staff would understand as well about Indigenous culture, but also mentored our families and strengthened their connections to the local community and linked our families to local services like VACA as well. So yeah, anything that I needed, I forgot. No. So that's all about us at Melton Montessori. Do you have any questions? I think been speaking for too long.
No, not at all. It's fantastic, and I really loved your inclusion song. I think it's often a area that we struggle to transfer what is our policy and what is our procedure in providing a service to families, but how do we make that real for the children and families that are a massive part of all the services, whether it's childcare or services, kindergartens as well. So it really highlights a really simple way that we can transfer that kind of policy and procedure into language that children understand.
And families as well. So if at our center, what we've done as well is we've created very visual, so we've got a lot of pictures, so family could understand what philosophy means and what our philosophy was. We also had to translate some into different languages, so family could also understand, and that's also including them so that they can be part of it and be included into our philosophy.
Yeah, fantastic. I'm interested, to explore, you talked a little bit about, I guess, the gap between how there can be better collaboration, I guess, in terms of supporting children and families with services like, I guess, child and family services, and how you think we might go about closing the gap.
So for us, a lot of families, the most important thing is to get to know your families and understand your families. We can say hi and bye, and we can do enrollment at the start. But a lot of our families need that extra support that you can go and ask them and start connecting them. And the more we open up to families to show that we're there for them and we're there to support them, it becomes more easy for them to give you that trust and let you know and help you to support them to kind of connect into services. We've had families that we had to help them with court. They were going through court and just giving them that extra support. Families, we had a refugee family, and when she came, she didn't know anything about childcare. She didn't know anything about kindergarten. So all that information we're giving doesn't make sense to her. But it's just those simple things that, do you have food? What can we do to help you? She wouldn't know anything to do with childcare subsidies, so there's no point of talking about that. But also sitting with her and saying, this is what you have to do to enroll a child, and making those connections and helping them. So we're very lucky in our center. We've got about staff that speak about over, how many languages now?
I think it was at 17.
17 languages, so it's fantastic. So trying to see, okay, who or which parent as well. Then we've got a pool of parents that support other parents as well. So it's also a matter of just getting that interpreting happening within our own community, and then going and linking to the services that you think that they might need. And that can also be with schooling when they're doing transitioning, for example. We're not going to assume that all families know the enrollment process, but it's a matter of knowing your families and going out there and saying, have you done this? Do you need help? Do you want us to give a school a call? Have you done tours? Do you know when the tours are happening? Because a lot of the forms now have become online, and as I said, majority of our families are coming from non-English speaking backgrounds, so there's no way that they'll be doing this online form. So it's a matter of sitting with them and saying, do you need help? There's also another family that we had to sit and do mock interviews with them because they were going to interviews, and when they come, they said, I'm not finding any jobs, and saying, do you want us to do a mock interview? Would you like to come in and we can do that? So it's just a matter of knowing your families and what you can link them with, the services around them, because again, the majority of them would not know.
Yeah, and that's amazing that you've been able to provide that kind of support for families, to practice interviews and be so that they can engage in the workforce and things like that, because it is often a massive barrier for families, particularly families that have English as a second language. I'm wondering if there are other services in the community that you would like, to collaborate further with in the future. Have you got grand plans of?
Look, we've got plans, and the plans is I wish early childhood services could collaborate more and better and work together, not looking at competition, but what's best for us industry, and seeing what we can work together to benefit each other and what's working with that services. So definitely I'm trying to advocate to see if we can get a lot of services to kind of work together and have those, whether it's quarterly meetings or within ourselves, and just seeing what the gap is and how we can work around that is one of my plans. And definitely pushing the bush kinder, because we're one of the services that's doing bush kinder in the city of Melton, and trying to get a lot of services to see the benefit of it as well.
Absolutely. And you can definitely see in that short video, the benefits for children. I think, as somebody commented in the chat, like, just the smiles on the kids' faces, and that opportunity to explore a very different environment than potentially the environment that they have moved into, in Melton, being, I guess, quite an urban environment. It gives kids very different opportunities to explore that play-based learning in a different kind of environment.
Absolutely. And that's what I'm dreaming, that all services, we should reach that exceeding level and work together as a team, because again, it's for our children that we're working with and families.
Is there a way that you are, I guess, measuring or tracking those outcomes for families? Like, it sounds like it's been a really positive experience. Is there some way that you're tracking?
Definitely. For example, the Aldi program that we get with the breads is saying that we sometimes get about 20 crates of bread coming into the center on a weekly basis. But not only our families are using it, but their families are letting the other families know, and it's something that we're helping families, especially in this time that we're in with the economic. That's an outcome that we can see that it's working. Also, families knowing that we're there to support them and asking and coming, and we're getting busy in terms of that side of community connection. Is an outcome that we measured. We said, all right, then we need more work to do on the side of community connection, because more families are wanting more help.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. It sounds, like you're really responsive to the community, and that your staff have spent a lot of, time to get to know the local community, and what they need.
Thank you, Michelle.
So I will open up the questions, and I can see Sigi is still here as well. If anyone has other questions they would like to ask either the staff at Melton or for the cluster. I'm just checking what's coming through in our chat as well. A lovely comment from Miv about such a powerfully communicated philosophy and pedagogy. Amazing, bringing your whole learning community along this journey. Thank you for sharing a little more about how you get everyone on board. It's not an easy feat. I don't know if you wanted to comment on that.
Oh, definitely, it's not an easy feat, and that's why I'm being very honest. There was a lot of ups and downs, and it took a very long time to work with, but we just got to continue advocating and working together, and pushing those barriers to make sure that we do it.
Yeah, absolutely. Do you have any advice, I'm wondering, for other services who might be thinking about, being inspired by what they've heard today across our 3 presentations, and thinking about starting, a collaboration, whether that's with the community in terms of families or other support services?
I think it's important that you get to know your families and have that open arm of just not asking, are you okay, every day, but just getting to know the families deeply, and opening that, because once you do that, you'll be surprised how busy you get in terms of the needs and the wants that families want. And a lot of families, like we've had families that have come through and spoken about sexual assault, and I've opened more than what we thought of, and it's just a matter of trying to find support services to continue digging in and working with families and continue putting those services in place, but also getting the staff members to be on board with it is one of the things. So not only the management team, but trying to get the whole team to work in that approach of community connections.
Absolutely. And yeah, like you said, some of those you don't know once families build that relationship, I guess, where that might lead. Or like you said, you've had some sexual abuse disclosures and things, but yeah, it highlights the importance of, yeah, being able to work, yeah, with the services that are available in the local community as well to support families to feel safe, particularly families who, you know, who have potentially come from very different environments. You know, to feel safe in engaging with those services. Excellent. I'll just double check whether there's any other questions for you in the chat. I don't think there are, but, you know, thank you so much for your presentation. I think it's been fantastic to hear about it. Actually, no question. Curious about the attendance rates at the centre and how this is supported.
So attendance is very high, which is good. And the families who we find that are not attending, we try to find what the reason is behind. How can we sort of help? We had a family that was going through child protection, for example, and we ended up knowing that the attendance was going downhill. The dad just needed that extra support, and he came to us and he said, child protection might take the kids, and we said, what can we do to kind of support, because we know he loved and had great connections with his children, but we knew that he needed extra support. So he said, well, I'm not coping well, and my house is in a mess and I don't know, and I'm sure they'll come and see it tomorrow. So the team from Melton Montessori ended up getting some cleaning gears, and we went to his house. I think it was about five of us that went in there. And we cleaned, we donated a lot of things that we didn't need, and we spoke to child protection as well, because we've got a lot of children with child protection, so we've got strong relationship with CP, and we told them what our plan was, what we did, and how we want to continue helping these families so they can stay together. And it was amazing. They ended up allowing him to have his two kids because we could see the connection. It's just he needed support. He goes through his ups and downs, and he was a single father. And child protection was so happy that we were involved and were working with this particular family and supporting him. And he was really good. And the days that he was feeling down, he'll come and let us know that he couldn't bring the kids. He was down, and we had to ask, what can we do to make sure that the children are coming as well, so you've got time to yourself. So attendance rate is high, and if it's not, then we kind of follow up with the family to see what support. So we're there to work with families, and they see that when you're working with them, and they're more open in terms of wanting that help from us.
Yeah. And in saying that, where you said you've got quite a few families involved with child protection, and I imagine similarly with the Child and Family Services workforce, I guess, is that kind of next step in terms of supporting families. I'm wondering, and I know Liz touched on this earlier briefly this morning in her presentation, but what is helpful? I guess a lot of our audience today is Child and Family Services practitioners. I guess I'm interested in your thoughts as a provider, I guess, about how when we've got services, whether that's Child and Family Services or child protection, working with a family who are particularly vulnerable, what is a good way to support that engagement with the centre in terms of, we know obviously educators are very busy during their day, and it sounds like in your service that they're encouraged, they're taking on lots of other projects as well to support the community. But what is helpful from your perspective in terms of building that collaboration around a child and family across different service types?
So if we know that the child is under child protection, the most important thing is to work with the families and being on the family side, because what majority of our families think is we're against them and we're going to be reporting everything we see. Of course, we've got duty of care and mandatory reporters, but also to make sure that we're supporting the families and working with the families and letting them know that we are mandatory reporters. We have to report what we see, but being on their side and working with them and ensuring what support do you need. So if they're facing homelessness, does child protection know about this? And how can we work with you guys to let child protection know what you're going through as well? If they're going through that mental health, informing child protection and being open about it and talking, and what services can we put in place and work with you, and how can we get vouchers for children to come to our service even through taxis. So in terms of that, it's very important that you're working more with the families, but still getting in contact with child protection and working with child protection, but child protection understanding that you're there for the family and working with the family, and how can we do to kind of improve these families so that they can stay together, and we're there to support them. So with this particular family, every night we used to make sure that they take dinner. So whatever the chefs cooked, that they're taking home, and then at least the kids are not neglected and not having dinner. It's something then we thought, okay, we can do that, and we can help this particular family to ensure that they're doing that. Or if we had one 6-week-old baby that came in, and the family comes in and they've got no formula to give us to give the baby, we ensure that we've got formula and letting them know that we will support them through that as well. So it's just those kind of things, being there for the families, finding, even if it's to go and buy secondhand clothes, or now we've got our own pantry, clothing, getting clothes and washing ourselves and drying. So going that extra mile, and we're lucky we've got enough, as I said, with our staffing arrangement. So we've got that capacity of helping families and connecting families and children while working with child protection.
Yeah, and I think it's really important, and it speaks to that, I guess, really true partnership with families, to be able to, like you said, be open with them about what your legal responsibilities are in terms of mandatory reporting, but also being in that true partnership with them to say, you know, like, we are here, we want to support you, and we want to help you, you know, with the things that you're really struggling with, particularly around your children. So kind of being on their team and saying, like, yes, you know, it can be scary when child protection become involved, or they, you know, let the family know they want to do a visit. But it sounds like, you know, the program is really developing that true partnership to say, like, we're here to support you too. Like, there are things that we have to report and things that we have to share, but that we're also here to work in partnership with you to help you achieve your goals, which is really important, and link them in with, the appropriate services to help support that outside, which I think is important, because, you know, we don't, you know, we can sometimes take that, I guess, and not understand how serious that is for families in terms of feeling that level of support in a really difficult time. Fantastic. Thank you so much, Fauzia. I don't think there are any more questions coming through.
Thanks, Michelle.
But yeah, thank you so much. It's really incredible to hear about the service, and how you're supporting the local community, and hearing just, you know, simple things that other services might be able to think about too, the food pantry and the, you know, the clothing. As well, being able to support families and being able to support some of those engagement with those extra programs like Bush Kinder and things like that, that removing barriers is really important for families.
Fantastic. And if there's any services that are willing to come in, we're happy to support through Bush Kinder and the mentoring program with services as well.
Yeah, fantastic. There is actually one more question before I let you go about how you're supporting ongoing the educator resilience and wellbeing at the service?
Oh, how we're supporting it. So what we do is we have staff trainings every month, catch up and see what do they want, like in terms of it has to come from them rather than myself and the management team, and how can we continue supporting the staff? What do they need from us? If they need to take some mental health days, they can. If there's things, what can we do as a service to support them go through what they're going through? So just again, being very open with your staff, but making sure that they understand that we're there for them, even if it's uni and they're finding it a little bit hard with their studies and balancing. How can we reduce the days? What can we do to give them that support? Do they need a support day off? It's individual, and I think you just have to sit with staff and get to know them as well, and have that open arm to show them that you're there to give them that extra support. And you'll be surprised that they will be open and tell you a lot that's happening with their life, and being there just to support them, and the ears to listen is the most important thing as well.
Yeah, fantastic. Do you think that approach helps, with retention? We hear a lot about staffing difficulties.
The services have been there 5 years, and yeah, all staff are there. Yeah. Laura's been here for 5 years as well, so
yeah.
We haven't had any issues even through COVID. We've never had issues with staffing at all. We're actually more staff than so we're something right is happening that we're doing.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, like you said, being able to not meet not only the families where they're at, but meeting the staff where they're at, and being able to support them, it does help in building that, the strong relationship with the community, with the staff, with the families, to build, I guess, that kind of team environment, which is fantastic. So thank you. Thank you so much for your time. We really appreciate it, and for sharing those videos. It's amazing to see those. And we've heard today about a lot of really successful partnerships in the early years space, in terms of people being able to partner with different communities, different services, different service models, which I think is really important. And we hope that you found that some of those examples to be quite inspiring, and are sparking some ideas that perhaps you can go away and think about in terms of how you might support your communities, or what kind of collaborative partnerships you might be able to develop in your local community. I know Liz made a great point earlier in her presentation as well about inclusion of children from particularly vulnerable groups, and that inclusion's not about children with additional needs. It's about children having special rights, and I guess their access to quality education is a right that I know we're all working very hard to support, but we all have a role to play regardless of the service or the organisation that we represent. So I would like to just quickly share our slides again. This is just just wait for that slide to come up. I'll just skip through to the end. There's just a brief QR code if people have an opportunity to scan that and provide some brief feedback about the session today and whether that was helpful for your work, so that we can help shape future sessions. And my colleague Jo will pop the link for that survey in the chat as well. But I guess, the big takeaway for me today is that, we've heard about so many different types of partnerships today, and that we can start very small with an idea that sometimes grows into a much bigger idea or collaboration or partnership. We've seen some fantastic examples from our service providers today, and also the early years cluster that Sigi and Paul talked about, and how that is being responsive to the needs of families. And I know that many child and family service providers either are or are working towards some place-based service delivery. So there's definitely opportunities to build further relationships between the early years sector and the child and family services support sector in some of those co-located arrangements, and look at how can we maximise those collaborative resources and supports to make sure that families have access to all the supports they need to engage their children in the quality, in the quality early learning services that are available in the community, and support that developmental progress for the children to get them ready for school. So definitely some opportunities as well for people to think about. And yeah, like I said, hopefully that's inspired you today. But I would like to thank everyone for attending today, and to all of our presenters. It's really amazing to hear how collaboration has worked in practice in the different environments you work in and with the different services. If you need some more information about starting some of those collaborative conversations, my colleague Jo has put some resources in the chat that might help you start some of those collaborative conversations. So there's some resources around reflective practice for care teams. If you feel like you're working in a case situation which needs a bit of a reset, that resource might be a bit helpful, about advocating for children in the early years, and some positive behaviour support guidance, which again looks at a really collaborative approach to managing behavioural issues. To stay up to date with any future events for the Early Start Bright Future project, please consider signing up for our newsletter if you haven't already. There are a couple of events we have coming up in October. So we have the Stepping Stones to Kinder training, which will be offered online in each of the 4 Department of Education regions. And so we'll include the information flyer with the registration links in the chat for you. And we'll also have a webinar in October, on the 22nd of October, looking at supporting culturally and linguistically diverse families to access early childhood education. So we've talked a little bit about that today, but we'll dive a bit deeper into some of the strategies and supports that might help support culturally and linguistically diverse communities to engage. And yeah, we would just like to say thank you again to all of our presenters and to all of you for attending today, and we will see you soon. Thank you.